Howdy everybody, welcome back to Combo Compendium. Instead of talking about the two crossover breaker decks that everybody's talking about, how about I talk about the one that nobody's talking about? And the main reason that I want to talk about the I don't know how to pronounce it properly, it's like Ryu-Ge, I don't know. But the reason I wanted to talk about this deck is because you can play it with Swordsoul. Swordsoul's kind of been power crept a lot in the last 2 years or so, but it's still one of my favorite decks that I like to kind of revisit every now and then. And the Ryu-Ge cards give this deck a lot more of a ceiling than it had before, where you're just ending on, 2 synchros and maybe a trap card and calling it a day. Let me go over some of the cards in this deck first before we jump into the combos, because I don't want to have to explain all this in the middle of the combo. The deck has 6 1-card starters, which is the Sosei and the Rising, which Rising just searches for any Ryu-Ge monster, so you can just add the Sosei. And what you're going to do with the Sosei is, during your main phase, you can add a non-pendulum Ryu-Ge card from your deck to your hand, then destroy this card, and you can only use that once per turn. And I don't know why its other effect isn't showing up on here, but its other effect is that while it's in the extra deck and a card on the field gets destroyed, you contribute a level 10 to summon it out, then pop up to 2 cards you control and set the same number of Ryu-Ge gates from your deck. And we'll get to the gates here in a minute. But what you're going to search off of the Mistfa is the War Zone. Now this card is insane if it sticks, right? When it's activated, you take a dinosaur, sea serpent, and a worm from your deck, and you add 1 to your hand, banish the other, and send the last one to the grave, but you're locked into dragons, dinosaurs, sea serpents, and worms for the rest of the turn. Those are 4, pretty good types, right? Dragon and worm are insane. Dinosaur is also crazy if you play these cards in Dinosaur, because, you can still set up crazy stuff like Conductor, Lars, Dolka, Varudras, like insane boards. And also, if you have Sosei in your extra deck face up, which you will if you used it to search this card, you can special summon 3 Ryu-Ge monsters with different types from your deck, graveyard, and banishment. Now, what are the 3 Ryu-Ge monsters you're going to be summoning and searching? First, we have the Hakva, which is the worm. You can banish it from your hand to get the Wyrmwind's realm, and if at least 2 monsters are banished, while this card is already banished, you can special summon it. And while it's on the field, you can place the Wyrmwinds you control on the bottom of the deck, and then add search for any Ryu-Ge card from your deck, graveyard, or banishment. This is the most important one in this deck, not only because it's a worm, so it's an extra target for like Mo Ye, if it's in Grave, Taya, and Pitch off of Longwan, but the second effect does come up quite a bit if it's on the board, because it helps you put additional bodies on field. Now the second one is Imva. This is like the one you care the least about. I don't even play the Sea Spires in this deck, because I don't think playing all 3 gates is optimal, because you can realistically only get 2 out of just the standard combo without requiring others in your hand. So I'm not going to cover Imva too much here, but it does have a good second effect. During the main phase, if 2 or more monsters were sent from the hand and or deck to the graveyard this turn, you can special summon it from the graveyard. Now that's important because you can get 1 send off of the field spell. Taya also sends from deck to grave, and Longwan discards to summon. That's 3 different ways that you can get up to the 2 for the Imva to summon out, which gives you another level 10 body to help you make Varudras a little bit easier. The last one is Kaiva. Now, you only play 1 of this because its effect is that it actually shuffles back into the deck to grab the Dino Domain. So if you draw it, you can just put it back in the deck, and it's not really a brick if you draw the one of. Now, the Hakva you play 2 because it has the most flexibility in combos and it's a worm, so having 2 is nice. And unfortunately, you can play 1 Imva, but if you draw the 1 Imva, your entire line is just dead, right? Like you can't do anything. So unfortunately, you have to play 2 because there's no way to just easily put it back in the deck. You draw one of them and the other is still in your deck. What you can do is use it as fodder for this card, the True King Barastos. Now this card is really good in the Swordsoul variant in particular. So what it lets you do is destroy 2 other monsters in your hand or field, including a water. So if you're bricked up on that second Imva, it's good fodder for this. And it special summons out by destroying those 2. If it is destroyed by a card effect, then you can special summon 1 non-water worm from your deck. Now, unfortunately, Mo Ye is a water worm, so you can't summon Mo Ye. But what you can do is summon out the Taya, which at this point in the combo, you're going to have Hakva in grave. So you will have the worm in grave immediately after summoning the Taya, and then that will get you to your, your Chi Shao search for whatever you want, and you can go from there. So that's kind of how the whole combo is going to go. And these are the ratios I'm playing. And then the domain, the Dino Domain is, you can only control 1. Ryu-Ge monsters gain 300. And Pendulum monsters and level 7 or level 10 or higher dinosaur monsters gain this effect, which is basically an on-field monster negate. So you can shuffle this back, negate a monster effect. And then the second gate, the second effect is kind of whatever. If you control a level 10 worm or the Sosei, you can quick effect make a monster's attack become 0. All your guys are so big anyway, I don't think they're getting swung over unless you're staring down like an access code. But the only other reason I can think of that effect being good is against Yubel. Like if they try to Yubel swing into one of your big guys, you can just make it 0 so you don't take damage. But the main reason you play this is that during your opponent's turn, any monster sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. So it's like a mini dimensional fissure that you can search very easily, right? So you can set up like a full board of interruptions just with the monsters in general, and then you still have like a macro just chilling in the back. And a lot of decks can't really play through that easily. So that covers all the Ryu-Ge cards, and I'll get to the combos in a minute here. And these are the Swordsoul ratios I'm kind of playing with right now. I'm not playing 3 Longwan because, like, mainly you're going to be searching this a lot. And the Ryu-Ge cards being able to access your entire Swordsoul line means you don't really need to max out on a lot of the Swordsouls. You do want to go over 40 in this deck because there are a lot of bricks, like I said. Right, like drawing the gates by themselves are kind of bricks. Drawing the Imva is kind of a brick. And this deck has a lot of awkward hands, so being able to mitigate the brickiness by going over 40 is not bad. That's kind of the general gist of this deck, so let's start getting into the combos. Alright, so now before getting too lost in the sauce on the combos, I do want to just point out that these are going to be like very fancy combos, right? At the end of the day, if you draw Swordsoul Engine, you can always just use the Sosei card or the Ryu-Ge cards to just make a Varudras and then do the Swordsoul combo under the Varudras, and you don't have to go through all the True King stuff and all the banishing and milling, and you don't have to worry about all that. And keep in mind that the field spell can also just search for Mo Ye and Taya and then summon a Varudras, right? these are going to be like fancy combos, but at the end of the day, you can keep it nice and simple without going through all the True King stuff, and you know, you kind of get the idea, right? So let's start off with kind of an ideal opener, right? Mistva plus Mo Ye. So we're going to start off with our Ryu-Ge stuff. We're going to pop the Sosei to get the Warzone. Warzone is going to add the Bassaros, and we're going to mill the Kaiva and banish the Imva. Now the reason you want to banish the Imva is because its effect is if 2 or more monsters were sent from hand or deck to the graveyard this turn, except itself, you can special summon it from the grave. Which means if you send this to the grave, you are losing out on that 1 free mill to trigger its graveyard effect. So if you mill the Kaiva and banish the Imva, you're already at 1 out of 2 mills to trigger the effect. So you always want to banish the Imva. So now we're going to go ahead and use our Warzone to summon out all 3 of these guys. Now we can activate the Fathomer in hand. We're going to pop 2 to summon out, which will then trigger the Sosei since a card was destroyed. And we're going to tribute the Hakva, pop these 2 cards, and we're going to get the Wyrmwinds and the Dino Domain. So even if the combo ends here for whatever reason, like if your, you know, Fathomer gets ashed or whatever, you still end on the Monster Negate, a big ass guy, and the Macro, right? And you haven't normaled yet. But if the Fathomer does resolve, we get to summon out our Taya here, and our Taya can banish the Wyrm from grave to summon out. And of course we will be making the Chi-Shao. Then we can trigger the Taya and the Chi-Shao here. So we're going to go ahead and add Emergence, and we're going to send this Longwan. Next we can go ahead and normal the Mo Ye, reveal the Emergence, and go ahead and make a Draco Berserker, get the free Mo Ye draw. And from here, you have multiple options. So if you want the Varudras, which is the line I'm going to be showing in this combo, if you want the Varudras. Alternatively, if you have another Wyrm or Swordsoul in hand, you can just use Emergence to search for Longwan, summon out the Longwan and make a level 10. So then you're ending on 2 Synchro 8s, a Synchro 10, and the Mistva, which is another Monster Negate, and the Macro. If you want the Omni Negate to play around things like, I don't know, Lightning Storm, Evenly, things like that, maybe some spell heavy decks, what we're going to do is we're going to, well, of course, first we can summon out the Imva since we've milled 2 cards this turn, and we're going to use the Emergence to search for Protos. Now, Protos kind of has anti-synergy with Varudras because they're both dark. So you can't, if you make the Varudras before Protos, it will just get popped if you call dark. And if you call dark with Protos, you can't summon the Varudras. So there's going to be awkward anti-synergies between Protos and Varudras. You just have to kind of pick which one you want to use. But in this case, we're just going to summon the Protos by banishing 3 with different attributes, which is why we milled the Longwan, because it gives us a fire to banish. And this will trigger the Hakva, since it was already banished, and 2 or more cards were banished. So it will summon out, and this will give us our Varudras. And this is where we're going to end the combo here. The Protos is kind of just chilling, not really doing anything. We basically used it as an extender to get to the Varudras. There are combos where I will show you later where you can make a Reprodocus and turn the Protos into a fire attribute so that you can keep all of your Synchros and the Varudras, and you can Protos to call fire. So you get to keep all your board and your opponent's locked out of fire, which, I mean, obviously fire is a really good attribute right now, so I'll show you that combo later. And there's multiple combos that, like, either you end on the Varudras and not the Sosei, but this is one of the combos where you can actually get both, and you get the full advantage of the gates. So this is a lot more than what Swordsoul usually ends on, right? Like, Swordsoul usually ends on you know, Chi Shao, Evil Longwan, and the Protos to call Dark. But now we get the Omni Negate with Varudras, and then Sosei is also a monster negate, and the Macro Cosmos during your opponent's turn, which could honestly just win the game on its own sometimes. So you can see how the Ryu-Ge cards kind of raise the ceiling of Swordsoul a lot more than it is just pure with the Tenyis. Now I will be interested to kind of play around with this when the new Tenyis come out, but for now this is kind of just what we're working with. Alright, so next I'm going to be showing off combos where you open the Sosei plus any Wyrm / Swordsoul monster. Basically any card you can reveal off Mo Ye or discard off Longwan, so it can be, you know, it could be a blackout for all I care, right? Just like any Wyrm, basically. We're going to go ahead and go through the standard Ryu-Ge stuff here that we saw earlier. Grabbing the field spell, adding the Bastaros. I messed up the mill here, but I don't think it ends up mattering for this combo in particular. Right, we can use the Bastaros, summon out, Ryu-Ge, pop 2, get our 2 gates. This is back when I was still playing the Spires, so ignore that. That should be the Dino. Then we're going to go ahead and use our Fathomer to summon Taya. Taya's going to banish our Hakva. And we're going to go ahead and add Synchro into Boxia. So now we can go Taya to send the Mo Ye, and we can do the old Boxia combo to bring back the Mo Ye, reveal a card, and make a Chi Shao. Now we get the Chi Shao effect and the Mo Ye effect, so we can draw 1, add 1. And we can go ahead and use this. Bring out our Sinister Longwan. And you can summon out the Emva too. You can use these two to make Varudras, but then you lose out on the Dino Gate effect, so it comes down to how much you want the monster negate, which technically Varudras is a monster negate, so you know, maybe it's not too bad. But yeah, I do end up making the Varudras here, so you can end on just like the standard Swordsoul stuff and get the Omni Negate, which the deck was missing now that Baron is banned. And then of course the Macro Cosmos, which, I mean, is really good, I've heard. So this is kind of just another standard-ish end board, and you know, it's going to change wildly depending on the rest of your hand. But it's still better than anything that Swordsoul could put up pure, and we didn't really start with any Swordsoul cards in our hand, so it's pretty neat. Alright, so here is a second variation of the Sosei plus any Wyrm combo. Right, we can go ahead and go through the motions here. I'll just let it play out. Not much to say that you haven't seen already. Make sure you remember to properly order the banish and mill. Alright, we're going to use Sosei, pop 2, get out the things. Again, that should be the Dino domain. And then we're going to go ahead and go for the Taya to get the banish. And we can go Chi Shao Taya. We're going to add Emergence. Then of course Emergence effect. Grab Mo Ye. And we haven't normaled yet. That's one thing you always got to keep in mind when you're playing with the Ryu-Ges, is that you get to this point without normaling. So if you just have the Mo Ye chilling in your hand, maybe go for something like a Blackout instead to get that those extra pops. But you can see we go for the Mo Ye. We can summon back out the Emva from grave. We can make another Synchro, end on the Varudras. So with the same opener, you can end on like 2 8s plus the Mo Ye draw, or like the 8 and the 10 and the Varudras. And if you also opened Longwan in this hand, you can end on, you can actually keep the Sosei in the EMZ, because you can use the Emva and then like a level 10 Synchro that you make off of Longwan, like a Chengying, to make the Varudras. So then you get the Sosei effects with the Dino domain plus the Varudras and the 2 8s. So You know, there's always simpler options, there's always more complex options. It's really, this is a deck you really just gotta kind of play around with to see what you can do with the hands you're given. And that's one of the things I like about it, is you can go as low or as high as you want to. So this next combo is going to be showcasing how you can use the True King to also just pop monsters in hand if you want to conserve materials on board. Like, for example, let's say you draw 2 Ash Blossom. Well, one of those is going to be dead, so you can extend further on board by getting rid of that 1 dead card in your hand, right? And the same applies to any of the, if you draw extra copies of any of the level 10 Ryu-Ge monsters, you can just pop those in your hand as well, because, I mean, they're not really doing much, right? So this will be an example of how you can do that. So we're going to start off the same as always here. Go for our Fathomer, go ahead and get our 3 summons. Now what we can do is we can use the Fathomer to pop the water on field and then the random monster in hand. And now we end up with 1 extra level 10 on the field, which can matter a lot if you've been, you know, paying a little bit closer attention to the combo lines. Right, so we can get the Taya here. We're gonna go Taya, banish, get out the Chi-Shao. Now again, you haven't normaled yet, so if you have another Wyrm in hand, you can add Mo Ye, you can add Longwan. But if you want to go for a more low to the ground play, like let's say you drew all hand traps, right? You can go for a more low to the ground play with the Blackout. Right, and then of course, the Emva is now live, so we can just go ahead and bring that out. We can use the Hakva effect, which I haven't shown off yet. Is that you can place the Wyrmwinds to the bottom of your deck, and then you can add this Kaiva from banished to hand. And since 2 or more cards were destroyed this turn, you can special it from your hand. So now we get a additional level 10 body. And this is going to give us the Varudras. And if you decided to go for the Blackout, keeping the Hakva on field means you can keep the Chi-Shao and the Varudras, because this is a Wyrm that you can pop off the Blackout. So this is a very like low to the ground play if you maybe you bricked up on hand traps and you just kind of want to make the most of your bad hand. Right, because I think you would have 3 cards in hand at this point, right? So you could have, you know, the Monster Negate, if you play the Dino, another Monster Negate, an Omni Negate, a Blackout, and then like 3 non-engine in hand. So that's still a lot of interruptions, right? Alright, so finally here, the last combo. I'm going to be showing off the anti-fire combo with the Reaper-Docus. Now, you can do this with just Sosei. Like, you don't need like any other external factors here in order to do this. Which is neat, because you can do the anti-fire combo while also going crazy with the Swordsoul if you have any. So we're going to go ahead and get out the Warzone as usual. Banish these, summon out 3, Fathomer to pop, trigger Sosei, Sosei tribute, pop 2, get these, summon out the Taya, Taya effect banish, make Chi-Shao, Taya, you probably want to send Longwan instead of Mo Ye to get the Fire Engrave, because we are going to be adding Protos here. Right, so we get the Dominance, or Emergence, what am I saying? Emergence will search out the Protos here. Now we can use Emva to summon out, make a Varudras, and now we can go Protos, banish, which of course will trigger the Hakva since it was already banished off the Taya. And then, since we control the Wyrmwinds, we can use the Hakva effect, shuffle that back, get out the Kaiva, summon out, and then we make the Reaper-Docus. And you want to make sure you put the Protos under one of the EMZs so that it lines up with the Reaper-Docus. Alright, don't forget that. Right, so now we can just go Protos. Protos, as you can see, is now a fire. So when we use the Protos effect, we can call fire, which will let us, obviously conserve our Varudras, because if we left it dark, it would just ruin our whole field. But this is kind of what you do against, Snake Eyes, Fire King, Tenpai, all those fire decks. I mean, it's kind of pretty good. It's pretty good, I won't lie. I don't think we used our normal or anything, so any extra bodies you have, Mo Ye go up into something like you can use Mo Ye to make a Draco Berserker, and you can't summon Qixing, but you can summon Qingying. So you still have 2 options you can make with additional extenders when you call fire with Protos. Now, a few closing thoughts here. I want to, lay out some extra tips and extra things to keep in mind when you're playing this deck. Because obviously I'm showing you all these combos uninterrupted, without any hand traps interfering. But a few things to keep in mind is that Sosei's monster effect, which for some reason isn't showing up. So let me actually, I don't know why it's not showing up here. But it's monster effect when it's in the extra deck to summon out pop 2 and then place 2. That can be triggered off of things like the Varudras negate to pop, and things like blackout. Also, if you're going second, you can trigger it off of things like Whale, Hot Red, Scarlight, whichever one of these 2 you're playing. One thing to keep in mind is that if the Sosei somehow gets stuck in your extra deck, you can actually just kind of keep it there. You can make a Varudras, and then during the opponent's turn, if you use Varudras to pop, you can then trigger the Sosei to summon out, and then pop 2 cards, which one of them can be the Varudras since it doesn't do anything now, and then that lets you get the gate. Also, when you are trying to OTK, if you have the Sosei in your extra deck, and let's say you're attacking with some of your level 10s, when you swing over an opponent's monster, Sosei also triggers. So let's say you attack with the Kaiva swings over something, you can then trigger the Sosei, tributing the Kaiva to summon, and then that gives you an extra 3,500 damage, which is a lot of damage. Other things to keep in mind is that if you open Sosei plus Rising, you can actually use Rising to just search for any Ryu-Ge monster, right? You can do the Sosei stuff, and then get Rising for a Hakva in hand, which will then give you the fodder you need for Mo Ye and Longwan. Finally, things to keep in mind is that the Hakva effect and the Kaiva effect to summon out, these are 2 extra bodies you can put on board at any time if you go through Protos on your turn, but on the opponent's turn, if you have the Hakva banished, right? So if it's banished and no other cards are banished, if your end board was Qixing plus, Evil Longwan, this is 1 banish, and this is 2 extra banishes. So you can trigger the Hakva on your opponent's turn if you banish 2 of their cards with Longwan, or banish 1 of your cards with Qixing, and then 1 with Longwan. Even Draco Berserker banishes, right? So you can trigger the Hakva on your opponent's turn, and if it survives through the turn, you can use its effect to put this back, and then search out the Rising, or, literally just any, right? You can search for any Ryu-Ge card as follow-up, right? It gives you a lot more options, so that's something you don't want to forget. Yeah, I think this deck's really cool. It has a low floor with the Sword-Souls, but also a high ceiling with the Ryu-Ges, and you can kind of pick and choose how low or how high you want to go, because even if you just draw the War Zone with nothing else, you can at least just search for a Mo Ye and then send an Imva, or search for a Taya and send the Imva, pivot into additional level 10s, so you might be able to get the Varudras without really having to use the Sosei stuff. It's just a lot. This deck has a lot of effects. It's going to require some practice, and the combos don't really do it justice, right? Because there's a lot of points where your opponent can interact and kind of choke out your Ryu-Ge combos. The Ryu-Ge cards are here to mainly just kind of eat hand traps because they threaten the Varudras so early on into the combo. They kind of just threaten out your opponent to use a hand trap. And then you can just follow it up with like a Mo Ye or a Taya and then go full Swordsoul combo. And your opponent already used their 1 or 2 hand traps just playing through your Ryu-Ge stuff. So overall, this deck's really cool. I'm excited to try it out. I got like all the cards for it at locals yesterday, so I'm gonna be playing it, and maybe I'll do like a locals live stream with it so y'all can see probably how much I suck with this deck, because it's a pretty complicated deck once you start going into the Ryu-Ge stuff. The Swordsoul stuff, I mean, that shit's easy, but these cards are weird and have a lot of weird effects. But that's all I have for this video. Let me know what else you want to see from the channel, and bye-bye.